Greetings, folks. It's another Free Friday community class right here on the YouTubes. I post these every single Friday covering a wide variety of topics: spiritual herbalism, herb magic, green sorcery, all kinds of good stuff. I'm glad you're here. This week, I want to talk about warming herbs because it's winter. And actually, we're not going to talk about herbs, really. So I wanted to use this as an excuse to talk about the fuzzy line between food and herb. What's the difference? What is the big separation between these two things? And in my experience, in my opinion, when we come to the winter and we start doing things like fire ciders and soups and stocks, the line gets really fuzzy because suddenly we're not necessarily in growing season anymore. We don't have as much access to medicinal herbs. And so these really well-preserved, well-insulated foods step into center stage, right? So I've been talking a lot about fire cider lately. I did an hour-long fire cider class on my Instagram live the other day. I've got a workshop coming up here in Salt Lake next month. And tis the season, right? That as the cold rises and starts to push inwards, cold has an inward and downward and condensing energy. We instinctively and ancestrally move towards these warmer foods that have an upward and outward rising, diffusing energy that combats, that pushes out the invading cold so that we don't get sick. And also so that the pathology of coldness doesn't take over, which can lead to a bunch of other challenges and issues for the body long term. So there's some deeper mechanics as to why we turn to warming foods in the winter. And it's, of course, very intuitive, right? When you're cold, warm up. When it's cold outside, ensure that the internal fire, the internal warmth is properly nourished and that it's flowing in a nice direction so that when we move into these cold spaces, when we breathe in lungfuls of cold air, the body has the resources it needs to harmonize that coldness rather than letting that coldness dominate, which is where illness sets in. So I don't want to go too far down that path. If all of that's new to you, I will put a link down in the class details below to a big, I think 2-hour-long class I did on this, about staying healthy and protected in the winter. So fire cider is an example, soups is an example too, soups and stocks, that suddenly we start working with onion and garlic and ginger and turmeric and pepper, jalapenos and cayenne and anaheims, parsnips, beets. Suddenly all of these foods that become the allies that we turn to stay warm in the winter step out of the realm of what we consider herbs, right? So people can craft fire cider with nothing but these root veggies, no herbs at all. You don't have to throw in the elderberry, the astragalus, the pipley pepper, all of that. It's not necessary. You can create a really effective fire cider just with the onions and garlic and everything. So for me, it's a really fun meditation on at what point does garlic stop being a food, a culinary ally, and start being a medicinal herb, to the extent that for lots of people in cultures around the world folklorically, and then now in our sort of contemporary practices of fire cider and doing kanjis and soup stocks and broths and everything, we certainly invite garlic and onions and turmeric and ginger and peppers into those spaces with a medicinal intent, right? It's not like, oh, I want my fire cider to taste really good, so I'm putting, white onions and red onions and garlic in there. Maybe that's on the list of reasons, or maybe that influences how much of those allies go into a fire cider. But ultimately, we're considering the warmth, the support for the respiratory atmosphere, the diaphoresis, the stoking of the internal fire so that we maintain core warmth while it's cold outside, and that warmth moves from the warm core outward, pushing out the invading coldness. That's what we think about. And then if we get into kind of reductionist pop herbalism, we can think about, oh, garlic is antiviral and antiseptic for the respiratory system and helps fight off cold and flu on that really base level. But we know it goes deeper than that. We understand that the warmth and the diaphoresis and the aromatic and pungency of these plants is their personality. It's their spirit and why they're supported for cold and flu season. So part of this is just a challenge, right? To say, think about the foods that you think about their medicinal virtues more than their flavor profile. And, how do we categorize in our brains, oh, onion's a food, but ginger is a medicinal herb? Or maybe it's ginger is a medicinal herb, but turmeric is a food. How do you create these compartments? How do you break things down? And why do you think that is? And where do you think it comes from? I just think sometimes a little self-reflection is fun this way. I'll tell you that one of the best definitions that I've ever heard, and I don't remember where it came from, but I'm pretty sure I picked it up from school when I was in East West. It was one of the teachers said something to the fact that what separates a food from an herb is potency and administration, right? That we will work with herbs because they're very condensed. They have a strong amount of phytochemistry and virtues and power and effect on the body and coaxing a response out of the body in a small space. Whereas foods tend to just be more broadly nourishing, right? That if you eat a bunch of onions, it wouldn't be the same intensity within the body as if you ate a bunch of ashwagandha root in the same way. They would unfold and cascade in the body differently. One is more nourishing, provides like vital sustenance to the body. The other one moves in and creates responses in the body, or coaxes responses out of the body, or brings wisdom into the body that creates transformation rather than just feeding the body system as it is, right? So I think that's really important. And then I think the other definition could be that there's just the way that we work with them, that we would not, again, it's worth contemplating why, it's worth asking why, but we would probably not tincture a white onion. We probably would not see tincture of onion, even though onion has epic amounts of medicinal virtues. It's one of the more medicinal foods that we tend to encounter on a daily basis. When people talk about superfoods, and it's usually like obscure berries traipsed out of the rainforest, I think of onions and garlic and turmeric and ginger and cayenne, right? Those to me are superfoods because we can work them, our food, into our nourishment cycles while also getting all of these constellation of magical medicinal benefits. So, why wouldn't we or don't we see tincture of onion? I have tinctured garlic, and I certainly have made garlic oil, garlic and mullein oil, garlic oil for doing ear work, for adding garlic to oils for fungal infections and things. And, we'll see cayenne tinctured in glycerites usually to cut the heat, but just an interesting thing. So for me, the difference is that foods tend to be nourishing, herbs tend to be medicinal and transformative. They go in and change something, whereas foods go in and just nourish the system as it is. And then the format that we generally work with foods in the form of food. We're getting a normal food level dose of something. We're getting some chopped onion or a cubed up beet, or a few pieces of kale, and it's coming in with a meal for the intent of nourishing, where with herbs we're getting a more concentrated, usually a stronger medicinal dose, or a stronger medicine that's being low dosed. However you work with that, because that's a big spectrum too. So something to think about. And again, I'm going to put a link down to that big class that I did for Aeon last month about protection in the winter months. And we, of course, want to talk about the spiritual energetic protection during this dark, cold half of the year. That's a very real thing. Ancestrally, we've always done it, and we should still do it. That class takes that concept of protection and moves it into spaces of seasonal wellness, staying not sick as much as possible. So I'll put that down there. But really, an invitation to contemplate the fuzzy line that separates food and herbs, and also to meditate on our instinctive awareness that when it's cold and dark outside, when the cold tries to invade and get to our bones, we want to warm up, right? It's very, very intuitive. It's incredibly simple. This is why energetic, temperamental, constitutional herbalism works, because we think about the language of nature. We think about the way that nature shows us how to harmonize an excess amount of coldness, or an excess amount of stagnation, or an excess amount of laxity in the body, because nature shows us that when something gets really, really cold, it starts to condense and freeze and become immobile and hypo in all of its actions, that when we add warmth to that situation, the warmth harmonizes and combats that excess cold and brings a harmonious state back to whatever the situation is. So nature's the great teacher, and the language of energetic herbalism, when we talk about herbs being warming and the environmental temperament in the winter being cold and condensing and dark, these are languages that don't stop at plant medicine, right? They're a way for us to interface with capital N nature. They're language symbols that allow us to understand the deeper workings of nature as a whole. It's not just like these energetic terms only apply to herbalism and then we have to do all of this other work to practice a nature-based spirituality. No. When you're engaged with energetic herbalism, you're speaking in a language symbol that connects you to the wholeness of things. And so you start to just feel more part of, and you start to understand the nuances and the personalities and the spirits of these seasons and these plants and these disharmonies and the individual bodies that we put them into. So it's all very, very important and very interesting, I think. So I'll put some stuff down in the bottom for you. Also, if you wanted access to advanced classes, our monthly plant spirit journeys, recurring courses, and all that good stuff, I'll link to my Patreon down below. If you have any questions or comments, or a favorite recipe, or a favorite plant that you like to work with to stave off the cold darkness of winter, share something down in the comments below. Let's create a little dialogue. And with that, I'll send you out into the winter months with blessings of peace and plenty and warmth. See you next time.